It's got the map of it. But one of the things that we have to understand, the biggest issue when it comes to a country industrializing is just the widespread use of electricity. That is, think about it. Electricity is something we take horribly for granted. You know, that's one of the things I find continuously. Folks who go on an Africa mission trip, we come back and say like, we didn't have electricity. It's like, this was crazy. We didn't have it. It's just kind of like, think about how much our lives are disrupted when the power goes off for like 2 hours. That's right. Well, you know, as long as you remember charging, you should be okay. I don't know, there's just all kinds of weird things that like crop up, like things you don't think about until you don't have power. Like, you know, we don't have any food because, you know, the fridge goes out. And, you know, I don't know if you guys, like my house only has electricity, don't have natural gas. So it's like, you know, the power goes out, it's not like we can cook anything.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can Sophie Osborne, Madison Bowling, E.B. Cecil, Mary Bates, and Alexis Luttrell come to the Lord Commenter?
Be gone. I don't know what exactly just happened there, but it sounded like Mr. Hauser was like gearing up an amplifier. He's about to rock out on a guitar, which would be awesome, by the way. What should we call these notes? Tell them all the things. What should we call them? Well, this is just this is location and place of Asia. Continue. This is like part 2 or 3 or something like that. Part 7 and 9. Anybody get that reference? You're a nerd, and congratulations. Anybody 7 and 9? Did anybody? 7 and 9? Fantastic. You see, this is great. Whenever I drop a nerdy comment like that you don't get, that just proves how cool you are. Fantastic. It's a Star Trek reference in case you don't know. Moving on. Those are...
Raven got it.
Yay! What are you doing there? That's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. It's fine. Whoa, what did that in there? What? No, I'm just sleep deprived, it's fine. Anyway, but yeah, no, electricity, and things like the Three Gorges Dam, part of the big thing of it isn't just to control floodwaters, although that's really ostensibly the main purpose of it, but it's also to generate hydroelectric power, which is kind of important when you're talking about developing into an industrial economy and then into a post-industrial economy. If you think about it, electricity grants us something that we take for granted, and that is simply we're no longer bound by daylights. Think about it this way. Even in our post-industrial economy, we are really freakishly tied to daylight. Like, why does school begin at 8 o'clock? Yeah, it's a pre-industrial schedule. And the thing that's interesting is like, it's completely inefficient when you get right down to it. I mean, think about how a factory works. There are 3 shifts, 8 hours long apiece, and the factory never stops. It goes 24 hours a day. How is that possible? Electricity, sure. What about electricity allows us to run a factory even when it's dark?
Light.
Sure, electrical light. Think about how that changes everything. I know how many of you guys are night owls. You know, I know it. We talk about it all the time. You know, imagine not being able to stay up because there's physically no light. You cannot see. You know, you're no longer bound by that. You can change. Not to mention how the light bulb changes everything in terms of like, you know, screens, you know, lighting diodes, all these different types of things. So I mean, electricity is necessary for going into an industrial economy. And the other thing is natural resources. You guys probably hear how many natural resources we consume in this planet. But what are natural resources? What are we talking about? What do I mean when I say we consume natural resources? What does that mean? Sure, we do. In some cases, fossil fuels. We burn them to create electrical power. What else? Trees. Yeah. That's something I don't think we quite realize how much.
I mean, Courtney Johnson, Peyton McClinton, Maddie Mayer, Aubrey Denham, Ellie Carrico, and India Biggs to the large temperature.
Do you need them or do you want them? Let's be clear. Be gone. From that side. Yeah, she's like, no. This side. Don't know what just happened. Power struggle. Yeah, it's amazing how much wood we consume, if you think about it. You know, it's in pretty much everything. The amount of construction materials we use, just unbelievable. And you know, there's more to it than that. I mean, again, we can name natural resources all day long, but the fact of the matter is you have to have these things in order to industrialize. Another major concern for folks living, especially in the east coast of Asia, is if you actually look at the map of it, almost everybody's concentrated in just a small area along the east coast, mostly in cities. Who's printing on my printer? Preferences. What is your favorite color? Okay. I think someone printed that about like 2 months ago. Oh, I got around to it. You're the worst printer. Anyway, land usage is a major concern. And like if you look at some places like Japan, Japan's a small place. Like it's really only the size of maybe two states, two U.S. states. You know, Florida and going into four other. You know, it's not a big place. And so one of the major issues is as we continue to develop, as we continue to build houses, as people are immigrating, or in our case, our own natural population increasing, how are we going to use land effectively? And so one of the big issues is, you know, in cities, you can only build so many places. You know, we talk about this with urban sprawl. Generally, people build up. But even that eventually runs out of room. So Japan has been relying on a couple of kind of unique ways of doing this. First of all, using landfills. Basically, you guys know what a landfill is now. So you dump a bunch of trash. Well, you mix it up with dirt, and you create land, essentially. Sort of like we talked about with Polder, and in the way of creating new land, they can do this, and have done it, and created new places to live, and new land to develop.
That's how Boston is, like a bunch of it is like landfill, because a lot of it was the river,
Sure.
with the boss, everything.
Yeah. You know, it's an effective tactic. You know, it can be used all kinds of different places, and it's again reusing stuff in a creative way. However, another issue has to do with public transportation. Let me tell you this: in Japan, public transportation is crazy good. Have you guys ever had to ride TARC on a regular basis? I used to back in the day when I was at St. X, and you know, it wasn't uncommon for like the bus just to not show up at times. I remember there was one time I had 3 of my buses not show up in a row, so it was like an hour late getting somewhere. And it was just kind of like, well, what are you going to do? Buses are late. In Japan, their trains are so close to on time. If they're off by 7 seconds, it's considered late. So it's one of those things that the trains are never late. If they ever are late, everybody on board gets a little like printed out piece of paper that says the train was late, because if they go to their boss and say, yeah, I'm sorry I was late, the train was late, and they're not going to believe you unless you have it, because they're never late. So it's that efficient, and they're fast. It's possible for these trains to go in excess of 200 miles per hour, these bullet trains. So if you think about like being in a car going 200 miles per hour, it's kind of unsettling when you think about it. But these trains don't quite behave the same way. It's like you're not like, you know, trains. You know, they're built for comfort and speed. Yeah.
Have you ever been to the Dallas airport?
Once, and it was going from one plane to another. We were going to Alaska.
Yeah, I was going to Mexico from there, and I got on one of those I guess it's like a train that goes around it.
Yeah.
Is that one? Because it went really fast.
No, not to my knowledge, anyways. But I mean, it does give a point though that trains are faster than cars. They can be because they're fairly limited on what's around them, you know, things like that. They're also more efficient than cars, but they just, you know, you're kind of limited where you can go with the train. You can only go where the track goes. So, you know, they have their own purposes, but you know, they are efficient things. There's also some kind of interesting things, like in particular about Japanese trains. For instance, there's kind of a weird job in Japan that is a train packer. basically you have these guys in train uniforms, you know, they're the station uniforms, and they hang out on train stations, and whenever the train comes in, they let people out, and whenever the train starts loading passengers, they will actually help shove people in. You know, and it's peak usage times. There's not like, it's just like standing room only, and you're gonna pack them in like sardines. These guys literally are like shoving people in, kind of, and then like doors closed. Okay, we're good. It's like, you know, seeing people pack for a road trip. It's hilarious. You see it on YouTube. It's a thing. I'm not saying it's like you're always going to experience this going on a train in Japan, but at peak times it can happen. It's kind of an interesting and comfortable experience.
I know in Disney World in the monorail, where they tell people, scoot over and you can't go here, stand there.
I don't know. Yes. I haven't been to Disney World, and I was thinking about this the other day. I think the last time I went, I was maybe 11. So this is over 20 years ago. And I'm just kind of like, I don't even know what's going on there anymore. So.
You can take your daughters.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah. Well, we're waiting. My parents have this whole grand trip plan because they love Disney. But it goes back to my grandparents. My grandmother would go to Disney World every single year. For years she did this. And so we went all the freaking time when we were young. But, you know, if the problem is if you go somewhere like, you know, 7, 8, 15 times, it's like, whatever, you get bored. That's what happened with us. So we stopped going. Pretty much. I remember, like, the last time we went, it was when they had Star Tours. It was brand new, pretty much. And, like, we were in, what is that? That's Universal? Hollywood, yeah. Universal Studios is a whole different place, yeah, you're right. And there's no one else in the park, because for whatever reason, it was like a dead day. So, like, we just kind of kept getting on the ride over and over and over and over. It was awesome, you know. Anyways, but yeah, I was like looking at all these rides I used to love as a kid. They're just like not there anymore. Like some of them are just gone. It was like, yeah. The thing that really kills me is the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride. I was talking to my wife about this because she's never been to Disney World. So we're planning on this huge trip whenever all the my parents, and when the grandkids are old enough to appreciate and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, we'll never get to experience that ride. And as far as rides are concerned, it is the most bonkers, insane ride anyone has ever conceived of. It was the last ride Walt Disney came up with before he died. And, like, so it was built in Fantasyland, which is one of the parks, you know, and it was 25% of Fantasyland. So it was literally one ride was a quarter size of this park. And then the complete madness of this, it was only a third of the size he had planned it. So like, you're like, dude, Walt, you can't build just one ride for the entire park. It's like, why not be awesome? It's like, we can't do this, you know, it's too expensive. And that's why they shut the ride down, is because it was, like, basically, it was the swimming, okay, are you guys familiar with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
We talked about it yesterday, actually.
I talked about the same ride?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, for a little bit.
Yeah, there's like a submarine.
Yeah, anyway, so it was this massive, total crazy thing, and it's things like that. You know what, whenever we're done with this, I'm just gonna have you guys watch the video so you can experience the ride and all the tackiness. It's amazing. So yeah, but yeah, this makes me very sad. Anyways, moving on. But capsule hotels is another way that they can deal with land issue, because what they do is a lot of folks who work in Japan, they can't afford to live in Tokyo. They can't live in some of these cities. It's too expensive. When you're just starting out, just out of college, you just can't make that kind of money. So what they do is they end up renting in subdivision somewhere else, and they commute in. Now, in some cases, this has to be so far away. We're talking like an hour, 2 hour, one-way trip to get there. So we're talking 4 hours travel time just to go to work. That's not going to fly. So what folks will do is they go in on Monday morning, and they just stay in the city, and then they go home for the weekends. And so you'll have people who, like, they don't see their family except on the weekends. So this kind of is a major stress point in terms of family life in Japan. But the other thing is where are you going to stay when you're hanging out? Well, there's a few options for this. I've heard of folks borrowing an apartment together, like a bunch of folks go together, sort of like how pilots will do in the United States. I've heard of folks actually making a deal with their boss and just sleep at their desk, essentially. It's actually it's actually seen as a culturally acceptable thing too, because in Japan there's this big emphasis on hard work, and you got to work hard to move ahead, but it's really more the illusion of hard work. Because I'm talking to these guys who work like 16, 24 hours a day. but it's like, that also includes like when they're sleeping and taking naps and kind of, so for what I understand is that the average Japanese worker works like, 6 hours a day or something like that, of actual work, and the rest of the time they're screwing around. So it's kind of like, it's very weird for Americans dealing with this because, like, there's a lot of American workers I've seen where they go work for Japanese companies and they just leave after 8 hours. And like everyone's like, where are you going? It's like, I worked 8 hours, I'm going home. Everyone's kind of looking at it, it's like, whatever, I don't care. And just, on they go. And there's a lot of Japanese I've seen who just kind of like, I kind of want to do what the Americans doing, but that's not culturally acceptable. So, But the other alternative is cheap housing alternatives. For instance, capsule hotels is one of the things that's come about, and kind of is a uniquely Japanese thing. But these are little hotel rooms that you guys can rent. Basically, it's, yeah, right. Well, the thing of it is they do look really, really small, but let me show you what it looks like on the inside, assuming you have very hairy legs. And this is what they look like on the inside.
It still depends on how you photograph it, because some of these they look really small, but other times it's just enough space for you to, sit and sit out.
Right. And you actually, the thing is cool, the bed actually lifts up, there's a little stowage compartment, so you can like store luggage and things like that underneath that. I've also seen where they got like those like banks of lockers you can rent, sort of like if you go to the gym, you like twist the key out, stuff like that. But generally these are located around train stations and airports. Some of them are easier than others, like, there might be some drug deals going on or something like that. The other ones are kind of like, it's whatever. But they're cheap and they're easy, and they have a public restroom, so you can get a shower, things like that. It kind of makes sense, Yeah.
I figured they'll be doing some cruise ships eventually.
Yeah, I mean.
If you spend most of your time not even in your room on a cruise ship, then what's the point of why
Yeah, being a cruise. It's possible. I mean, I will say this: cruise cabins aren't that big to begin with.
The first time made it smaller though.
It's true. Although, it's kind of funny that you think about space. We take space for granted in States in a lot of cases. Not just in terms of like space that I can inhabit, like my personal bubble around me, but just like public spaces and how we use that. Like it's just kind of interesting cultural thing as much as anything else, because we have this given assent that there's a certain like parameter around people when you talk to them. And in different cultures, that's either greater or less. So like, for instance, there are cultures where it's like perfectly acceptable to talk like this close to somebody. It doesn't be like, don't do that, And people react very interestingly when you violate their culture. Someone did this as an experiment for sociology recently and was purposely getting as close to people as possible. It's weird, like, she would get right up on someone and they're like, oh, excuse me. And they're back, like, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I got so close to you. It's this weird, like, bit of mental back flippery that we do. Anyhow, let's do a new section. We did good on that one. Actually, we did well on that. English teachers are going to be hounding me till I die. But you know what? That's okay. I can't believe I talked to you guys about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea 2 days in a row. This is what happens. Let's see. It would be region. I need to come over here. Region. Oh, that'd be human geography. Derpa. No, that's the wrong one. That was the one I wanted. Those words, the droids I was looking for. Sleep deprivation. Human geography of Asia. You will do it. I will tell you what you do because you do what I want you to do. Hey, it's purple. Bam! Let's get the dragon in the bathtub. Is everyone ready? Oh. I'll wait. No, I won't. Moving on. Oh, goody. We get to talk about religion today. Woot. So we'll probably talk a little about this and then move on. All right, so starting with the Middle East. So, obviously, in the Middle East, most folks practice Islam. Quick history about Islam. First of all, how many of you guys have studied this before? You guys familiar with all these different aspects? Fantastic. Those you got it? All right, so basically, according to Muslims, there is a connection between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Essentially, the idea was that God has been trying to communicate his laws and his mandates to human beings for centuries. And basically, the message keeps getting screwed up. He sends a prophet, and the prophet tells us the truth, but then as people retell that prophet's truth, they kind of change things. It's sort of like the telephone game. You guys ever played that as a kid? But basically, eventually stuff gets wrong. And so he has to send another prophet to fix the mistakes and change everything else like that. So the first prophet, the first major movement was Judaism, got screwed up. And Christianity got screwed up. So finally he sends the prophet Muhammad, which is known as the seal of the prophets, basically the last one. And essentially, instead of speaking to the prophet through other individuals, he literally directly went to Muhammad and said, all right, start taking notes. This is what I want you to write. And he brought forth a faith that was the literal will of God. And because the message was 100% correct this time, there would never be another prophet again. And so the book that Muhammad brought, the Quran, was the foundation of Islam. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sharia law, or Sharia, but basically it is a type of law based upon Islamic teachings, but it's not just the Quran, it's also what's known as the Hadith, which is the kind of like sayings of Muhammad. Because basically what happened is like people would read the Quran and be like, I don't really understand this, Muhammad, like what about this? And he'd be like, well, let me explain. And so that's the Hadith. It's basically his explanations of stuff. So there's a few different aspects of Islam, and basically the main core of it is the 5 pillars. Basically those pillars are faith, prayer, fasting, tithing, and pilgrimage. Faith is basically a statement of faith. That's the first step to becoming a Muslim is saying you are a Muslim. Basically, Muslim means he who submits, someone who submits to the will of God. And in this case, the saying, the faith, is there is no God but Allah, Muhammad is his prophet. Saying that and believing it, you are a Muslim. That's it, done. From that on, you have all these other things that every Muslim is supposed to do. Second step is prayer. A devout Muslim will pray 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. They are supposed to pray towards Mecca, which is the holy city where the religion was founded. And basically, how accurate you are to that is dependent on where you are and how devout you are, I suppose. If you look at mosques, all of them basically have like a line that's pointing directly towards Mecca. They're actually aligned to point towards Mecca. However, generally it's a feeling of well, east or whatever direction Mecca is from where you are in the world, and you just kind of work that way. If you are incredibly pious, 5 times a day is how it works down. Usually it's 3. Fasting, basically there's a month, the holy month of Ramadan, which is very similar to Lent, actually. If you guys actually have paid much attention to Lent and what you're supposed to do, it's actually a month of fasting. We tend to say, like, when you get something up on Fridays, you don't eat. The whole idea of Lent is actually fasting the entire time, the entire period of Lent. So that's kind of similar to Ramadan. So there's a lot of fasting. And basically it's from sun up to sundown. After sun goes down, you can eat. So basically it's, a lot of hungry people till the sun goes down. And so to kind of keep your strength up, there's all these kind of things that are popular culturally. For instance, one that we're familiar with is sherbet. You guys know what sherbet is? Yeah? You get that violently orange ice cream stuff from the store. It's like it's so sweet that after a few bites it starts to hurt your mouth. And it's amazing. That actually comes from a drink that was popular in the Middle East called sherbet. which is basically fruit juices and things like that that's chilled usually. Some cases it was actually served on snow if you were really wealthy, and so it made it sort of like ice cream like dessert. So that's kind of where that comes from. But anyway, so you have these things that can help keep your blood sugar up. And basically, if you are pregnant, if you're a young child, things like that, you're kind of exempt from it. Or if you're otherwise your health is compromised, then you can ignore that. But otherwise, it's kind of expected that you're going to fast during Ramadan. Tithing, basically, every Muslim, I believe it's 10% of the wealth they earn is supposed to go towards the church, although it can be more. And if you look at historically Muslim nations, they tend to have a very high amount of aid to the poor. There's a lot of money put into soup kitchens, to public hospitals, bathhouses, wells, all kinds of stuff necessary for public health because of this sense of Islam. It's also kind of interesting, the idea they have about wealth, because if you look at like Christianity, for instance, we tend to have a really negative outlook on wealth. If you look at, for instance, how often in the Bible it talks about like evil rich people, we tend to look down on rich people a lot in Christianity. In Judaism, they really don't. Jews tend to look at wealth as being a sign that God is blessing you. So this actually is kind of historic nonsense where anti-Semitism comes from. Muslims, they kind of have the Jewish attitude about it, but you shouldn't be too wealthy. So it's kind of like an interesting mix of the two. It also depends largely on the culture where you're at. But what's also kind of interesting is how they view it in the day. Because the idea, when it comes right down to it, is if you're wealthy, you should, basically the attitude is to he who has been given much, much can be expected. You know, you should be doing a lot with your wealth to help other people, not just hoarding it. And so there's this kind of like, interesting thing about that. Like, for instance, rich people aren't supposed to be wearing like really fancy clothing. They're supposed to be wearing just like the same thing anybody else. Now that tends to not actually happen, but what you see interesting enough happen is a lot of like Muslims who are very wealthy, when they get older, they start wearing crappier clothes. It's like, oh, I should actually be doing what I was supposed to do. It's just kind of interesting. And then whenever they die, there's like, it's basically they're all buried the exact same way. The idea is that you pretty much go in, or you come out of the world the same way you came in. So that's kind of the idea. Lastly, pilgrimage. If you can afford to do so, at one point in your life you're supposed to go to Mecca and go on pilgrimage. Basically, this is to reinforce the idea that is in Islam of the ulama, which basically is the brotherhood or sisterhood of all Muslims, that we should be helping each other out. It's sort of like the idea of Christendom, which you see in a lot of early Christian communities, and still exists within the Christian attitude of service and helping each other out. The idea is basically it's like a retreat. You're supposed to go to Mecca and experience this religious experience and basically visit religious holy sites and kind of get centered with yourself in the faith, so to speak. That's called the Hajj. Now, what if you can't afford it? Because let's be honest, taking a plane to Mecca is going to be kind of expensive. There are actually charities that their sole purpose is to help people out who can't afford to do it. So there is all this kind of help out there for you if you want to do it. But basically, the thing that really makes the Middle East kind of interesting is that all the three main monotheistic faiths have holy sites, and some of which are actually holy sites in all of the faiths. Again, because like Islam, it sees all the other two as kind of like brother or sister religions. In fact, Muhammad actually wrote a letter we still have, I forget where it is, it's somewhere in Saudi Arabia, I think, basically saying to all Muslim kingdoms, you have to protect Christians and Jews. You can't attack them or hurt them. We need to help preserve them because they're basically like our little brothers. They don't have the full truth, they're kind of naive and silly, but we still love them. That's the idea of it. And when you look at groups like ISIS and the Taliban, it's like, did you miss this message? Because, he kind of said, and you have to do what he says. Again, what they do has nothing to do with religion. But anyway, so we have this kind of interesting dichotomy of these holy sites, And maybe look at somewhere like Jerusalem, which is this like center point of all these different religious faiths. Needless to say, it was fought over for hundreds of years during the Crusades, and had some pretty interesting things going on there. What's really kind of weird is even while the Crusades were going on, there's actually quite a bit of like camaraderie in a sense between Muslims and Christians. It depends on where you are in the situation at the time, but, they can kind of get along in some cases. Now, there's also a lot of smack talk between them, as you can imagine, but, this is that's how it is sometimes. All right, we're going to leave that there for now. I'm going to stop this recording. And, because why?